Hello everybody. So this is going to be my first pipe tobacco review. I have a few notes here written down as far as the order in which I want to discuss things. Hopefully at some point I'll get to some kind of a format for these videos so it goes a little bit smoothly. So this evening I'm going to be reviewing Blackwood's Flake by McClelland. It's in a really nice looking tin. I really like their label with the whale and all that. Apparently, the story goes that when they founded their company, the whale was something that the early settlers to America saw on their voyage, and it was a sign of new beginnings or something like that. I'm probably bungling the story somehow, but anyway, so this tobacco is kind of a loose flake. It's enough to either decide whether you're going to rub out or stuff on its own like this. So the too long didn't read version of this is that I think this is an excellent tobacco, and it's definitely going to have a place in my rotation, at least until I get through the other 100 tobaccos that I probably have at this point and find other things that I like better. So, excellent. If you haven't tried it, buy it now. Okay, so let me do a quick relight here. I'm about halfway or 2/3 down a bowl of this in my Stanwell. I Diplomat, I think the basic shape of this is called. I usually use a lighter, but it's not on hand at the moment, so. Some smokers can discern the taste transitioning as you work your way down through a bowl. I don't know if my taste has developed that far yet. I'm not too sure if I'll get there. I mean, I do notice that as you get to the bottom, of course, oftentimes if it gets wet, sticky, then you can burn it too hot. You end up lighten it a lot because it's wet, and then it burns too hot and it gets acrid tasting. And it's just at that point, it's just I just dump it out. So I do notice that, but I don't notice before that point. I'm not too sure if I'm really dialed into the different notes and things like that. Unless it's like a plug or like really thick flakes where and I don't rub it out, so it's the different types of tobaccos aren't blended completely. And then in those instances, sometimes I am able to tell a little bit of a difference in what I'm tasting. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this lit while I'm talking here. So Blackwood's Flake. This is a Virginia tobacco, and that designation I'm finding is not entirely meaningless, but unless you have a tobacco that's just straight Virginia, it's going to be a blend of some sort, and there's going to be a lot of different types of Virginias and maybe other things in there that give it its complexity. So although yes, it is in the category of Virginia, I tend to kind of categorize things a little bit differently in terms of taste. So I have 4 main points I want to work through here. The first is the overview of the tobacco itself. According to the tin, it says the natural sweetness of mellow red Virginias mingles inextricably with the richness and inherent spicy aroma of black stoved Virginias in this doubly aged red and black all Virginia cake mixture. So according to this, we have red Virginias and black stoved Virginias. Based on just a little bit of reading on the internets, I found that red Virginias are those which are ripened a little bit longer on the stem. That makes sense. I've seen fields of tobacco when I lived on the East Coast, and when I've traveled through Maryland and Virginia, especially the state of Virginia, a lot of tobacco fields, and I've seen them when they're all green, but I've never seen them in any other stage of the crop. So I imagine that later in the season that they take on color and turn red at some point. So they're ripened a little bit longer on the stem, and again increasing that sugar content probably. And then the black stoved Virginias apparently are yellow Virginia, which I'm assuming is not allowed to ripen as long on the stem. So it's picked earlier, I'm assuming. I could be wrong. I'm assuming it's picked earlier, and then it is cooked or heated in some manner that turns it black. And so I imagine that there's a lot of caramelization going on in there. It probably has to be cooked at a very certain specific temperature so that it doesn't burn, and that it's allowed to kind of disintegrate or partially liquefy or whatever. I don't know. I'm just imagining these things. I've seen some videos online of how these tobaccos are processed. So if you have any more specific information than that, or can point me in the right direction on a good resource, then that'd be much appreciated. So red Virginias and black stoved Virginias. The tobacco is sweet. It's not as sweet as some other Virginias, but it does have some sweetness to it. It's not overbearing. It's pretty smooth and consistent all the way down the bowl. So let's go through my tasting notes here. I'm just going to read this. Sweet, spicy, swamp smell. So that's the aroma. I'll get into that a little bit more later on the aroma, the tin aroma. Burns well, slow, few relights, orange blossom, mint, smooth mouth coating. That's probably one of the first things I noticed about this, actually, is how pleasant the mouth coating is. It's not too heavy. It's not like a thick coating all over your mouth, but it kind of it makes you feel like you're kind of chewing on something a little bit, something of substance. It is complex. It is delicious. The imagery that I had, and probably partially, due to the name of it, Blackwood's Flake, the imagery that I had is, say if you're walking through a forest and it's kind of dimly lit, and then you happen upon a little bit of a clearing where the sun's coming down and there's a little patch of flowers in a forest. That's kind of the imagery that I imagine going with this tobacco, and maybe some of the scents involved. Some sweet fragrance of those flowers, but in the background you still have the deep overtones of a woody, deep woody smell. The nicotine is mild, quite mild, I think. I think I'm a little bit sensitive to the nicotine in a lot of pipe tobaccos, so if it's mild for me, then it's probably very mild for other people. Stays lit easily. I have rubbed it out, and I have just stuffed it as tight as I can, and either way, it stays lit pretty easily. Except for right now, of course, because I'm filming. Yeah, near the bottom of the bowl starts to get a little bit of acrid. Slow the smoke down, or just dump it out at that point. Some tobaccos I find you can smoke it all the way down, and it's pretty good. You know, it doesn't really as long as you're paying attention to your cadence and not smoking it too hot or fast, you don't get a lot of ash or anything at the bottom of the bowl. This gets a little bit sticky, I think, at the bottom. Not a problem for me. I don't really mind it. So I was thinking, you know, I'm still in this educational phase of pipe tobacco. I'm really, the more I read, the more I realize how little I know. I would recommend not rubbing this tobacco out. And trying to grab, it's going to be a little bit difficult because it's kind of shredded. You know, it's flaky, but it's shredded a good degree. But you can kind of line up those flakes a little bit, and just, you know, get a nice good plug there and just shove it right down in there. And I have found that this tobacco that it is fairly sweet, you know, because it has these aged and cooked Virginias that have a higher sugar content, that it benefits from a tighter pack in the bowl, because you do not want that sugar to burn too hot. It doesn't have trouble staying lit. The moisture, I think, in the tin is perfect. It needs no drying. Just stuff it in and go. That probably varies depending on what part of the country you live in and how humid and dry it is. But in California here, that's coastal, it's, you know, humidity might be around 30, I want to say like 20-30%. So I have no problems with the moisture content. Perfect for me. So I found that my experience with brewing beer is actually pretty helpful in relating to how tobacco is made. So with beer, it's there's innumerable ingredients that you can use to make a beer. It's not like wine where there's one ingredient, just grapes. Beer, you have hundreds of different kinds of grains, and maybe, like, you know, 300 commercially available hops, and you know, yeast, any kind of yeast you want to use, even domesticated versus wild yeast versus bacteria. It's just goes on and on and on, and the possibilities are absolutely limitless. So I'm finding that with tobacco, it's kind of like that. I don't know if I'm not too well nearly as dialed into the supply of tobacco and the crops and where they come from, and how consistent you can have a crop be. With beer, the fermentation process, there's an opportunity that if there's some kind of well, how should I put this? The yeast is definitely the most important component to beer. Yeast makes beer. The brewer does not make the beer; it's the yeast, and the yeast imparts it can impart a tremendous amount of flavor and you know, create something truly magical. And in many ways, the yeast sometimes can make up for lack of consistency in the grains. Although it is extremely important to be able to replicate the process that you use to make a beer, and that's what separates the professional brewers from people like me, the amateur home brewers. Although some home brewers are magnificent and amazing at producing a consistent beer time and time and time again. That is the truly skilled brewer. So I imagine that the same thing holds true for a maker of tobaccos. That anybody can put something together that tastes wonderful, but it's the people who can replicate that process over and over and over again, year after year, and have it taste pretty much the same. So I really admire that skill level. So back to the comparison with beer and the flavors. Sometimes when I'm reading reviews, I don't really find it very useful, because it's like, oh boy, I really taste the Virginia in that one. You know, I really taste the Perique. Yeah, That's, to me, that's like saying, boy, I really taste the Cascade hops. Oh boy, I really taste that pale malt. Well, okay, what about the flavors? What about the overall experience? That doesn't really tell you about the overall experience. I can taste the Cascade hops and the pale malts, but be drinking, some fairly mild beer from one brewer, or some totally, screwy, super sour beer from, like, Sierra Nevada or something. So it doesn't speak to the amounts of the one component over the other. I mean, sometimes some tobacco reviewers get into that at that level and relate it to, the layering of flavors and percentages of tobaccos used and all that. But to me, it's not enough to just say, boy, I really taste the Perique on that one. So the flavors in this, I have almost gone through the entire tin in trying to parse out those flavors. And it is very difficult because I'm finding just how well blended this tobacco is. It is very complex. It is very smooth. It is not simple. It's not a simple tobacco. There's dried fruit in there. Like earlier I said, orange blossom. There's mintiness. There's kind of this crisp, kind of like a brisk autumn breeze, just like a little bit. Like at the end of summer when the humidity comes out of the air and you get that first nice, crisp, cool breeze with a little bit of scent in the air from the drying leaves on the trees. That's what it's like right there. The end of summer, the beginning of fall. The room note is really great. I really like it. Just before I started this review, I was thinking of the three main parts of the experience for me. One, the tin aroma. Two, the taste as you're smoking it. And three, the room note. And some tobaccos, it's got a mediocre tobacco has a really fantastic tin aroma, but mediocre taste, mediocre room note. This one, they're all really good. All of them. The tin aroma is really amazing. If you can get over the typical McClelland, kind of vinegar taste. I didn't even notice it until I started reading reviews where people are saying, boy, it tastes like vinegar. And then, like clockwork, I open up my next tin of McClelland tobacco, and there you go, vinegar. Some people liken it to ketchup. I think that's because I don't know what the vinegar taste is from. I got to read about that. But a lot of tobaccos have that kind of barbecue-ish tin aroma, especially in the tin. It smells really thick, like thick barbecue sauce. And then that with the vinegar, well, put them together, what do you get? Ketchup. But I did not get the ketchup in this one. A little bit of vinegar, and then once I'm smoking it and the room note, that's gone. Okay, so those are the first two things. The overview of the tobacco, the types of tobaccos that are in this, the flavors, which I'm still parsing that out. And then the third thing I wanted to go over was this kind of concept of, I don't know if this is going to make sense to anybody, the tin aroma to taste ratio of goodness. That's what I'm calling it. The tin aroma to taste ratio of goodness. So getting back to this notion of a mediocre tobacco having an excellent tin aroma, but then the rest of the experience isn't that great. for me, that's like this the most disappointing thing when I get this amazing tobacco, and it smells just like it. I want to like eat it. I open it up, smells amazing. I want to just start chomping on it. And then I start smoking it. I'm like, the experience of smoking it isn't anything like the experience anywhere near as good as the experience of just smelling it unsmoked. And that's kind of frustrating for me. So I imagine that as my palate develops for different tobaccos, that'll get a little bit better, but it's really kind of frustrating. This, however, this tobacco is pretty darn good. So I would say for me, the experience of smoking it and smelling the room note and everything, it's not staying lit, is almost as good as the tin aroma, which in my experience, for me, is pretty damn good. Maybe at some point I'll be able to like quantify that in some way, have some metric or something that captures that notion. The fourth section that I wanted to cover was how to pack this, and I did mention that before. Stuff it whole and tight. Really get it in there. When I was first learning when I was first starting to smoke a couple years ago, I was like obsessed with how do you pack it? I gotta pack it in exactly the right way. I was so obsessed about it. I watched video after video after video, and the more I watched it, it's like the more stressed out I got about it, because it's like it's so scientific, and there's all these different methods based on the type of tobacco. Well, after a while, I just you stop obsessing about little things like that, and you just get into you just develop a routine that works for you. It's part of the smoking ritual. And at this point, I'm thinking, however the manufacturer made the tobacco, that's how I'm going to smoke it, because there's no way that my knowledge of the tobacco will exceed theirs. So if they went through all the trouble to layer it and press it and heat it and age it and all these different steps, why am I going to just take this and just rub it out? And there's just no point to that. So if it's already rubbed, I'll use some variation of the 3-step method, or the one where you just settle it in there real loose and then take a plug and kind of stick it in there. That's my typical 2 different processes for doing ready rubbed. But if it's a flake, I'll try to fold it and stuff it. If it's especially if it's a Virginia that's got a lot of sugar, I'm learning that it benefits from being packed a little bit more tight, because you don't want the air to be able to rush through there too fast. You don't want it to burn it too fast, because the sugar will ensure that it will be pretty hot anyway. So that is what I recommend. So far in my little book of notes and logging what tobaccos I'm trying, I'm going on like a 10-point scale, and it seems to work for me. I figure that it takes at least smoking through an entire 10 just to get a good score that I can rely on, because I'm finding that they're just, it changes a lot. My first smoke may not be anything like my last smoke of a given tobacco. So give it a chance. Don't judge anything based on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 smokes, because you really do have a different experience, and from smoke to smoke oftentimes. So this one, at first I was kind of blown away with this one, and I rated it a 9 on a 10-point scale, 9 out of 10. I'd probably be comfortable with an 8. I think that's probably a little bit more appropriate. If I want to go to a 20-point scale, it might be a 8.5. I'm trying to just, I'll just use whole numbers. Probably just leave it as an 8 at this point. Very, very good. I'll definitely be buying some bigger tins of this and, putting them away in the closet or under the bed or whatever. And I'm also looking forward to trying other tobaccos of the same line. So I also have British Woods, same personal reserve from McClelland. And again, isn't that an amazing label? That's just really, really nice. fact, I wish I had something, like a poster or a picture or um, something I could put up on the wall that's really big. I mean, that would be really cool if they sold something like that. I haven't seen anything like that though. This one is really good. I've only smoked it like 3 or 4 times though, so I'm not anywhere near ready to review this. This is like it's got latakia in it, so it does have Virginia, some other stuff. It's on the other, not in the same category as something like this. This is deep, and I'm a little bit hesitant about describing this as strong. It's not strong in terms of nicotine. I find it quite mild as far as that. I can feel it a little bit. For me, it's just about perfect. It's not a nighttime thing. It's not. It doesn't hit you like nightcap or anything like that. Dark, deep, complex. You got some nice kind of blossom scents. A little bit of dried fruit with some kind of the aroma of like some flowers and but a nice kind of woodsy overtone environment for all of those flavors to mingle in and take shape. And this is a really, really, really good tobacco, so highly recommended. All right, thank you very much.